Fine. So, so we have this paper. I think this is on enterprise Java technologies, and what I believe is that like first unit was completed. Okay, fine. So you already have done JDBC part, right? And maybe something on the web services. Okay, and you have any questions on JDBC related to JDBC or anything? Yeah.
So we learned the theory part of JDBC,
Okay.
and we still need some hands-on on this practical part. And for web service part, we have gone through some very little stuff.
Okay.
So I almost like a beginner.
Okay. Web service part. Okay. Fine. Actually, my feeling is before web service, fine, understanding the web application itself would be a better idea. Okay. So you have idea on what is this HTTP protocol, about the HTTP protocol itself?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you got the idea on HTTP protocol, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fine. Okay, because today what I intend is to take on the web application part. It was like if you have any queries related to JDBC, then I'll address those things also if you want. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Okay. And okay, one thing I'll be taking Friday, Saturday. Okay, that's what I want to do. But actually, I have some like there is some personal reason for which I'm not available in the from the next week. For 3 weeks, I won't be there. Okay, I'm out of station. I mean, I can take, but then I won't have the same facility because I'll be at some other place, not in Baroda. So, taking, I mean, I don't think I'll be able to take it in this manner. So I feel, I mean, I'll take extra sessions after, that will be after 22nd of October. Okay, fine. So that should be okay, right? We'll take some extra sessions then, not just only 2 days a week. We'll take maybe some extra sessions in each week.
Okay.
Fine, that should be okay, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, fine. So, yeah. So, and anything about web application was introduced to you earlier? No. What is a web application or anything about Tomcat or any such thing? No. Yeah.
No, sir.
Okay. No introduction to web application. Okay. Fine. So let's start with the. So what is a? Fine. Let's get the introduction of the web application. Yeah. So. Fine. So I think. So yeah. So according to what is a web application? Yeah. Anyone? What is
Sir,
under? Yeah.
web application is a piece of software that is available over internet and on the web browser.
Okay. Fine. So it's the one which is normally it is for which the it's a client server kind of an application, right? Web application is the application on the server side. Okay. Fine. And browser becomes the client. We have this browser which becomes the client for such application, right? So because we access the web using the browser, yes. So fine. So this is like okay. So web application. Okay, fine. So fine. Let's start with this. In a browser, how do we normally access? From a browser, we access resources, right? Okay. resources using a, fine, isn't it? Fine, we know this. And what is the form of a URL? What's the syntax kind of a thing for a URL, which we use in a browser?
So we start from HTTPS,
Okay.
double slash.
Yeah, it may be HTTP or HTTPS. Okay, and then we have colon. Yeah, and then okay,
forward slash,
then
www,
okay.
and domain name.
So this is nothing but your fine, your host. I'll put it as host, right? It's your host. Okay, what else?
Domain name, then top level domain.
Yeah, this is when I say host, that covers the domain basically, right? Server host, I'll put it as server host. Okay.
We also have a path.
Okay. And any other things which are optional but maybe you have missed out or anything? Okay. Yeah. There's one more thing which we can add here. It's an optional. I put square bracket just to indicate it's optional. Colon and port number. Optional, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fine. What will be the default port number? If I'm not giving,
80, sir.
it depends on the protocol. This is a protocol. This should say, okay, let me put this. This is the protocol. Okay, colon slash slash, and we might be using, we have, okay, I'll put the other optional part now. Okay, you might even put user, right? User at, okay? And we may even be using user, right? So there is some user ID at, and then comes a server host. Okay, then comes colon, and you have the port number. Okay, after port number, yeah, what else? A slash, and here we'll say, oh, it's kind of a path, right? Some kind of a path. Okay, and after path,
The page name.
okay, you can have, sorry, you can hash and some reference. That's what you're calling as the page name, right? Your reference basically.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So yes, we understand this is kind of a this is what we use as a URL. Fine. So this is the input given to a browser. So then how is this input used by the browser? What will the browser do with this input? You have mentioned a protocol. It's basically that URL is nothing but this is your input. Okay. You're saying, okay, let's find. So typically, let me just put it as HTTPS colon slash slash, and I'm ignoring the other part. I'm just giving one example here. So you may be saying, okay, you have, I think your university has a domain. What's your university's domain? RCC, GUJART, university.
University.ac.
I think it's .rcc. Is it like this?
.ac.in.
Acha, Gujarat.ac.in. Okay, and then slash. Okay, now what happens is after this slash, maybe what you want is see. So what is this? This is identifying your host, server host. Where is your server, right? That's being identified by this. We are not going into how this is going to be resolved into an IP address. if someone knows the IP address, instead of this, even an IP address may be okay. Okay, if you directly know the IP address, yeah.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
आपने जो HTTP protocol वाली है,
HTTP.
क्या वो सर protocol user enter जो second line लिखी है, तो सर वो second type का URL है कि
नहीं, ये जनरल है, स्क्वायर ब्रैकेट में डाला है, इसका मतलब ऑप्शनल है, हम नॉर्मली लिखते नहीं है, ठीक है।
नहीं सर, वो जो पूरी जो लाइन है,
हाँ,
वो एक अलग टाइप का URL वैसे भी हो सकता है, या वो एक्सटेंडेड
हाँ,
वर्जन है जो
ओके
URL लिखा।
हाँ, मैं दिखाता हूँ। ओके फाइन, यू गेट दिस? नहीं, ये gitlab.com एक है साइट, ओके, आई सेड praveen@gitlab.com. There is a login ID available to me as a user. I am there, so it will understand this. You can give. Here, user information can be there. Okay. We don't normally use it, but yes, it's possible. Fine. So that I have written in more general form. Okay. Okay. Yeah. After this, so what's the next thing? So in this Gujarat, in our university, maybe we have various kinds of applications, right? So we have a lot of resources, but what we would do is we would organize these resources, we will group them. Okay. Oh, all the academic things, right? So I have /academic, okay, / and then maybe there are further things, right? You can have your own path, whatever. So we are saying, okay, in academic for MCA, and then again academic, and then maybe you give the department name and or some other. So you use this hierarchy here, right? Further hierarchy can always be created. Okay, it's as per your requirement. You can have your, so though we call it as a path, it's not normally a physical path on a file system, not necessary. Okay, this we are saying yes, because I want to organize it for academics. Okay, fine. So academic is one place, right? Okay, fine. And maybe all syllabus. So you want to keep for different things? Yes, you can organize them. Academic is one. Administrative could be another one. Okay. So you can basically, you have various resources. Resource means some kind of, you hit this URL and you'll get back a response. The idea is this is the URL by which you will, okay. So /academic, and then what else? Any further thing you would like to mention? Maybe syllabus. Okay. In academic, you have syllabus and /MCA3.html. Maybe someone has an HTML like this, and not necessary in HTML, right? Okay, it could be anything, and we are just taking one kind of a typical example which we may have, and hash, and of course you can use some reference. Okay, MCA3, and maybe it's for MCA3 whole page, and Java is at one page, right? Hash Java, something like this. Okay, fine. What is important to us is this part. The first level of grouping which we are having, right? This is what we actually use as an application. We call this as an application. So a Java application, a web application, basically, this web application which we are looking at is from the point of view of a Java, from the point of view of the Java technology which has been defined. Okay, fine. In Java we have what we call as servlets. Okay, fine. And so we have a servlet, we'll have a servlet engine, or you may call it as an engine, or you can even call it as a servlet container. So there's a servlet container which is there. Okay, people may use a term called web container. Okay, so fine. So we have a web container, okay, where several web applications, okay, may be deployed. Okay. In our example, in that now this I'm just trying to link it with the URL basically. Right? So example could be, okay, for our university, someone may say, oh, we have a web application by the name academics. Okay, so academic is one web application. On a university web server. It makes sense now. What is a web application? So yeah, so a web application is a collection of URLs, resources. Okay, fine. So now our syntax can become something like this. Oh, so if I pick this protocol, this syntax, okay, let me now change the syntax, and we'll add after this part. Okay, yeah, this is optional part. Instead of the path, now I'm breaking the path into web application, okay, and slash, and then we have some further path. Okay, path within the application, right? Fine, clear? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. One second, I just have to save as. And what I'm creating today, right? That will be available to you. Okay, so don't worry about that. It's being saved here. Okay, what I write here as notes, right? This notes, I'm pushing it on a Git repository. Okay, and this all this will be available there. Okay.
Sir,
Huh.
will you upload this lecture on YouTube on your channel?
Yeah, yes, we can upload this. Fine, we'll be uploading. Okay, so let me put it. So once the session is over, right, this notes, this whatever I'm writing, right, that will be available to you directly, https:// and /gitlab.com/praveen/pjt-2023.
Sir, can
Yeah.
you paste this URL in meeting chat box?
Okay. This URL, I'll paste it there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's. Okay. One second, I'll just first save this, and it's not gone into the right place. It seems. Okay. Okay, I'll paste it here. Okay, just someone could check that this is working. Okay. Yeah. And
Yes, sir, it's working.
yeah. Okay. So whatever is there, yeah, that I can just put. Okay, so this will get updated till this point. One second. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that, right? So this will get updated, right? Okay. And so at the end, I'll just update that. So don't worry about that. Okay. And so we get this point. Fine. So web. So all our, if we, so yeah. So what we are now looking at is a server, right? So we have a what we call as a. If you are thinking of a web application needs to be deployed on a web container. Okay. Fine. A web container typically. Fine. So some example of a web container. Okay. Fine. We'll be using Tomcat. Okay. And which version of Tomcat? Have you earlier been told about any Tomcat, any particular version of Tomcat or anything? Because or I don't know, like in your lab, you have any Tomcat, particular version of Tomcat? Because there's going to be a difference which starts from Tomcat 9. Okay. Anyway, it won't be making much difference to you in the sense. What has happened is earlier, okay, see, everything as far as Java related things are concerned, we always have specifications, right? So we have got something called servlet specifications. Okay. And we have servlet specifications which were managed for each version. So we have servlet specifications. I think a version number I don't recollect, but each time a new servlet specification comes. I think servlet specifications 4. Okay. For which there is a new Tomcat version. So okay. So earlier, okay, it's not only the servlet specification alone, but the other specification as well. So all these specifications managed by, okay, servlet specifications are managed normally by Oracle. Okay, fine. But then their implementation would be done by various containers. So there'll be various container provider who will have their own implementation of the servlet specifications. Okay, so that the servlet things can work for you. Okay, fine. So when I say a web container are nothing but your various kinds of implementation of this specification, servlet specification. One of the implementation is Tomcat. Okay, now coming to Tomcat, Tomcat has been managed by Apache. Okay, fine. So Apache Jakarta, fine. So now what has happened is this up to Tomcat 8.5. Okay, fine. Things were managed and the entire API itself, right, up to Tomcat 8.5, API was using packages as javax.servlet. Whatever. Okay, fine. So it always started with javax.servlet. Okay, from Tomcat 9.0 and onwards. Okay, the API uses packages as Jakarta.servlet. So it's only that first word will have to be changed. Otherwise, the classes, interfaces, everything is same. And the package name has changed. That's it. Okay. So if someone is trying to, someone built using some application using the API of Tomcat 8.5, okay, which would work on Tomcat 8.5, and he just tries to deploy that application as it is on Tomcat 9, it won't work. Okay, you'll have to replace all your import to use, instead of JavaX, just say Jakarta. Okay. And these are some licensing issues, and basically this is the Apache fellows, they actually want to keep Tomcat open. Okay, they want to keep the things open. Okay, the specifications, they don't want it to be controlled by some particular company. Okay, so they have their own specification. They match with the specifications provided by Oracle. Okay, so they just for some maybe certain licensing issues, they have created this separately. Okay, so only this would be the only difference, right? As far as the within the JavaX dot servlet dot whatever else you may be taking, everything else remains the same API. Classes, interface names would be the same. The package, fine, the first word in the package, fine, instead of JavaX, it has to be replaced with Jakarta. That would happen if you are using Tomcat 9 and onwards. Okay, fine. I think when your syllabus has been designed, okay, at that time probably it is talking about Tomcat 7, it seems, right? So what we'll do is we'll go up to, and we'll keep Tomcat 8.5 so that we may follow javax.servlet. Right? But you should be aware of this, okay? That if you are going to use a later version of Tomcat, something from 9 and onwards, then you will have to make change in your code, and that change would be that you should be replacing JavaX, the very first letter JavaX, with Jakarta. Okay. Fine. So that I just want to clarify on that, and then we can proceed, I think. Fine. So that should be clear. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think so. What do? We follow Tomcat 8.5, or we jump to 9 in our examples here. See, if you want to match things which is there mentioned in the syllabus, we may, I think, stick to Tomcat 8.5 then. Okay, fine. I think that can be okay, right? We'll use this, okay, because most of the text, whenever you are reading somewhere, you will find it because they may not be up to date. Fine. So you may find everything with javax.servlet. Okay. Fine. So we'll stick to that only, right? Okay. Okay, fine. So we'll use Tomcat 8.5. Okay. Fine. And Java version, you can use any version. And I think all of you know Java 21 has been released, right? Are you aware of that? No.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it was on 19th September, right? Recently released. Yeah. Okay. So Java version you can use any, but Tomcat will be 8.5. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's now try to understand the interaction between browser and the server. I'll try to explain it with diagram. Okay. Right. So typically, what you have here is okay. So you might start Tomcat server. Okay. So Tomcat is just one example. Okay, there are other servers also. It's not only Tomcat, but typically Tomcat is what is used for In academics, it's always Tomcat. Even in production, there are many places where Tomcat has been used. And of course, if there are really very large application, enterprise applications, then there are other options also which are used. So it's not only Tomcat, fine. So we are talking in general currently, okay. So in general, you may have some kind of a enterprise server, or maybe I'll call it as a web server, okay. Okay, I'll use the term here as web container. Okay, so we will have a web container. A typical web container for us is Tomcat. Okay, fine. And from a browser, so let's say this is a browser, some client is here. From a browser, he is giving a URL here. So you give a URL. Okay, so in the URL, fine, you would be when you key in a URL, fine, you will be giving host. Okay, see, first part in the URL, what are the various parts of the URL? One is protocol, but even before protocol, it would look at host and port combination. Fine. So look at the host and port combination, and what happens if you know host and port? What can we do by using host and port? We can make a socket connection. I don't know, have you done some networking application using socket, server socket, or any such thing? No. Okay. Anyway, fine. See, typically in Java API also we have this java.net package with servlet, socket and server socket classes. I'll not talk on those currently, but one thing, typically these two things are used. First part is host. What does host information give you? Your domain name, which is fine. Many of you said, okay, there's a domain name. But so what happens to the domain name? How is it used? A domain name is resolved to a IP address, and by taking the help of a DNS, domain name service, right? So it can be resolved to an IP address. Once it is resolved to an IP address, what does it? It identifies some machine, right? And it identifies some host. Okay, once the host has been identified, right, on that host there are a lot of services which are running. Okay, so a host has lot of services, and one service would be running on the port which has been mentioned. Okay, fine. So it will, if there is some service running on that port, the client is able to make a connection to that application. What is the application on a server machine? Fine. So there is some application which we may say this is a server application. Okay. In our case, this would be Tomcat. Okay. Fine. So what does Tomcat or any other web container do? It just listens on a port. Okay. When you start a Tomcat application, it would start listening on a port. Okay, one of the things which is done is, okay, I am working on port number, typical port number. Yeah, you're aware of this port number business. Port numbers in a network connection, there's a port number always involved. TCP IP port numbers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, typically, yes, if it was HTTP, by default, if you don't give the port number, and which is normally not given, right? Then depending on the protocol, it decides, oh, if HTTP is the protocol, port number 80. If it is HTTPS, it will be 443, right? So like that, right? And it's not only HTTP and HTTPS, there are other protocols. FTP protocol is there, SMTP is there, POP3 is there, IMAP, and so many protocols are there, right? For each protocol, there is a port number. Fine. So what is happening is, for each of the protocols, right? When we say protocol, that means there is some kind of a service which is available on a server, and a client would just make a connection by knowing the port number. Okay, I have to connect on that machine any process which is currently listening on a port number. Okay, so host and port from your URL, right? Port number, if not mentioned, then decided based on the protocol. So first thing is make a connection. Okay, fine. Just get connected, and on this connection, now the communication can take place. Okay, fine. Host and port used for establishing connection. Okay, it's just like you have made a call, right? When you have to make a call, you should know the city code and you should know the phone number. Okay, fine. So host is your city code, port number is your phone number, something like that. Fine. So you have just made a connection, but then after making a connection, what you need to do? Start talking, right? That means you need to send something, right? But that whatever you talk has to be something which is understood and known to the other side. That language should be known to the other side, right? So they both should follow the same language. That's where the protocol comes into picture. So host and port used for making a connection, but on this connection, how to communicate on this connection, that will be decided by the protocol. So now we are talking about protocol, which is the HTTP protocol. Okay, that S which we are getting is simply to make the protocol secure. The content of the protocol doesn't change. It's only that the socket connection which is there is a secure connection. Okay, so that anyone could who is trying to sniff, okay, if someone is sniffing the network, he will not be able to make out what is there. Okay, it will be on encrypted thing. So secure is only for that purpose. Otherwise, as far as the what is the content which is to be what is sent and received in this communication, that will be the same. It doesn't change from HTTP and HTTPS. Okay, fine. So we'll look at what is this HTTP protocol like. Okay, fine. So typically what a HTTP protocol does is, yes, so if we have given a particular URL, the first thing is make a connection from that URL. Fine, host and port was identified, connection was made. Next it knows it is HTTP protocol. Okay, we are assuming this is HTTP protocol. So if it is HTTP protocol, fine, I know I have to talk using the grammar of the HTTP protocol, right? So whatever is to be given, fine. Now the next part comes into picture. After that, in the URL, if you had seen, what was the URL? It said slash, and then it said, so there was, host and port slash and then academic, right? And slash, and so we have all this thing. There is a path. Okay, so this is what is this entire thing. Okay, after the host and port part, whatever is the remaining part of the URL, this is what is actually conveyed to the server by the client. So client on this connection is just saying, okay, get, and it would just, because you type this URL, it says, okay, I want to get this resource. There is a resource available, and this is slash academic slash and syllabus or whatever. Right? So you typically, whatever else was there, that entire thing is sent from client to the server. Okay, and then the client is waiting. What is he waiting? He is waiting for a response. Okay, so once this is communicated to the server, now it is up to the server. I have received a path here, okay, with the help of a get, and I have to give a resource. I have to give back a content. Okay, so he's supposed to give back a content. So first thing what he has to look at is this entire thing, right? The path which was there. So it will examine the path. It will say, okay, this is slash academic. Now, how to deal with this? It all depends on this container. It's totally dependent on the container, how the container would deal with a given path. Okay, fine. Normally, what you would be having is, there will be some place, fine, which would be configured for this container. This is the web container. So it has been configured to read the application. Thinks all my web applications, okay, are in a particular folder. So maybe there is a folder which is configured for all the applications. So typically, in case of Tomcat, there is a folder wherever you have installed Tomcat. There will be a folder called web app. Okay, now this what we are looking at is on the server side. Fine. If you have deployed, so if you are running a Tomcat, right? Fine. Tomcat when it is installed would also have one of the folder called web app. Okay, so this is a folder within Tomcat installation, fine, provided by the Tomcat installation. Okay, now the purpose of this folder is this is a place where all the web applications will get deployed. So what it is looking at here is in this you would have a folder for every application. So academic is one of the folder there. Okay, this is my application, a folder for the application named academic. Fine. There can be another folder for the application named admin. Okay, fine. Okay, so like this. Okay, and then so these basically corresponding to these web application, there is a folder in the web container. So web container is going to manage folder for each web application. Okay, fine. So if I think I don't like have you installed Tomcat already? Anyone has installed it?
So in our personal PC, I think we couldn't do, but in lab
In lab it is there already?
yes, sir.
Okay. So you are having which version of Tomcat? Okay. Even if you don't know, that's fine. It's Windows machine, Linux machine. I just want to know that. Lab.
It's Windows.
Achha, it's Windows. Okay. Because with Windows, there will be like this would be probably installed as a service. Okay. Fine. It is going to be installed as a service. You will have to find out the folder. Okay. Which corresponds to your version of Tomcat. Fine. Where Tomcat has been installed. And you will find typically there will be a number of folders. Let me now write it here. Okay, fine. There will be some folders like this. Okay, so there will be a Tomcat install directory. I'll just call it as a Tomcat directory in which you have one folder called bin. Okay. And there'll be another folder called conf. Okay, you'll also have a folder called web app. Okay, so look for this folder web app. Okay, and within this folder there might be a few ready-made applications. One of the applications, there's a special application which you may have by the name called root. Okay, well, this is root is a very special name. Okay, we'll talk about it later, but let me tell you that is also one web application, and you will find probably a few more applications. For example, here you might find an application called admin. Okay, admin there is the Tomcat's admin application. Okay, fine. So you wanted a application by the name academic, so you can create academic. Okay, sorry. Fine. So you can create an academic. I think I have a habit of using slash, but it would be backslash because it's Windows. Sorry. Okay. Fine. Clear. So if you want to create an application, yes, you can have like this. So if what you could very easily be doing is something like this. No, nothing at all. Just create your own folder. For example, I create academic folder. Okay, and in this you can create a folder in this folder you can put some HTML files as well, fine, some images, some JPEG files, any kind of resources can be there. Any file can be put here. Okay, I'll say any resource file. Right. So you may have any kind of a resource file which is managed over here, and once you have, because you have this folder for academic, okay, and suppose you restart Tomcat. Now what happens when Tomcat starts? Okay, when Tomcat starts, it would understand that whatever are the folders here, okay, within a web app, they are taken as applications. So it would start supporting, okay, it will start supporting URLs, http:// whatever is the IP address where your Tomcat is running, fine. See, you can, it's not necessary, most of the time I think you do your practical on the same machine where you are having Tomcat, or you have it at one place, Tomcat is installed and running on one particular machine, and you work from and test it from a different machine. You can do that actually, fine. So Tomcat is just going to be running as a server. So that service is Tomcat service is started on one of the machines, Windows machines, and the other place you will be using the IP address of the machine where your Tomcat is running, fine. Okay, fine. So 192.168.0 dot maybe whatever, you should know the IP address maybe, right? Okay, so IP address. Okay, so wherever the Tomcat service has been started, that machine's IP address must be known, and there if you have already created a folder called academic, fine, so you can then say yes, IP address, and of course by default most of the time the default port number, okay, how the Tomcat has been configured is it's configured for 8080. Okay, typically the Tomcat's configuration is like that by default. Okay, there are in that configuration file, configuration folder, there are some files where you can make changes, and if you restart Tomcat, and this port number can be also changed. Okay, fine. And slash, and then what you have to give is the name of the academic. Okay, name of a web application. So a web application for Tomcat would be simply one folder, okay, with all its resources, fine, a folder containing various resources, and here are here I can give any file name here. Yes, if you have some HTML you can put here HTML, right? So that's first step. Okay, so if someone wants, yes, you can try this and you should be able to see the content of any kind of file which is here. So if you have HTML, yes, that HTML can be served here. Okay, and so this is one starting point, okay, so, right, which we have. Now we are not always interested in giving a file as a, just giving the content of a file, that reading a file and giving it back to the client. Some client is asking, I want this file from this folder. It's not like that. Basically, it's not about giving a file content from a folder. Okay, you may be interested in dynamically generating the content. And the content is not available in a file, but content needs to be generated by a Java application. So you want a Java program, you want to write some Java kind of a component, okay, which is responsible for generating the content. Okay, fine. Okay, so I'm now defining the servlet part. Okay, servlet is a servlet can be, because it can be more than fine. generating content. Which will be sent by the web container. When I say web container, Tomcat is one example of that. Okay. So typically the idea here has been that I'll switch here. Fine. The idea here is get and some path is what is given to the container. Container looks for that content, typical content. Yes, if it's a file, it can just straight away the content of the file can be there. But this container can be configured. This can be configured, okay, to look for each application. So it has a folder for each application. So in the folder for the application, we can configure it and say, oh, if this is the kind of path you are looking for, okay, if this is the kind of path you are looking for, I have a Java application, use this Java application, okay, use this particular method. There's a method, use this method, and the method will generate the code and put it in one place. It will generate the content. So the servlet's role will be to generate a content and put it in some place, from where once it has the servlet has done that part, it has put it in its in the correct place. Fine. Then the container's role will be that whatever content was generated by the servlet, I need to send it back as response to the client. Okay, so it has to give a response. Okay, what is a typical response going to be like? Yeah. So for example, suppose someone has said, okay, I'll just put like this. Instead of academic, someone forgot and said, okay, academics slash. He might have given correct things, but one thing, he made a mistake here. Now, what do you think will be the response coming from the server? And you have experienced this kind of a response.
No page found.
Yeah, 404. Fine. It will just say 404. Fine, file not found or whatever, right? So basically, the response which goes, one thing you okay, a few important things are when this client is sending to the first communication is from client to the server saying, get me this, right? What I have shown you is only the first line in the communication. There are multiple lines. It's not just one line communication. Okay, there are multiple lines which are sent from client to the server, because server you just say, okay, you have each browser having its own different kind of capabilities, right? You understand Firefox has different capabilities. All these different browsers, they have their own typical capabilities. Some of them may have some additional capabilities, some of them, so they need to when the request goes from this, this we'll call as a request. Okay, get is nothing but a request. Okay, when a request is sent from client to a server, the server needs to know some more information about the client. So it knows, oh, I have information about the client. It can be helpful while generating the response. Oh, this client is not a browser, but rather it is a browser which is from a mobile. If it's coming from a mobile, maybe the content which I should send may have to be changed, altered slightly, and it should the weight of the content response should be less. And it cannot be very rich content. Okay, maybe we need to make it lighter. Okay, so all such decisions need to be taken on the server side. Okay, fine. So one thing, how will the server know who the client is? So for that reason, okay, in the HTTP protocol itself, we have the typical syntax of HTTP is like this. Okay, now let me write it. Okay, so typically HTTP request. Let's put a typical HTTP request. Okay, fine. So request is, we have a first part is a method. We call it as method. Okay, example is get. Okay, after method, it would even mention okay. It would be some path. Okay. For example, it might just say slash index.html. Even this, with a file name. When I say path, it includes a file name part. Okay, and then it would say, okay, we have various versions of HTTP, right? So there used to be HTTP slash 1.0 also, but 1.1 or 1.2. Okay, so you might say, okay, this is HTTP 1.1. Okay, so yes, here I should actually say protocol. Okay, that's the syntax of the first line. Okay, this is request is, this is the first line. Okay, this is the example, this is the syntax part. Okay, fine, followed by, so it is this followed by, okay, let me put in this, and then would be, we call them as headers. Okay, so there are request headers. So there are headers, for example. Okay, this will say, okay, I want this, and then there will be some headers which are request headers. So request header might be, okay, okay, agent colon, and then it will have some, now this will say, okay, this is Firefox, and whatever, along with this, the version and other things. So there are more things here. Okay, the idea here is, with the help of the agent called header called agent, it is communicating who the client side is, which particular browser it is. Okay, agent would change to a device name if it's a mobile kind of a thing. So mobile, which mobile it is, right? So this can change, agent will change, and it typically depends on the client. Okay, it's communicating about the client. Fine, it will even send preferences. I don't remember the header's name, but it would have some it is able to even locale, I think, I don't know exactly if it is locale or some other thing, where it will say, yes, what I understand, my preference would be to get in, okay, HIA underscore IN dash IN, yeah. I prefer to receive the content in Hindi. Okay, that's my first preference, if possible. So you are basically the client's all preference, everything related to the client, all information about the client is sent in the request. Okay, what do I prefer? Oh, my preference is this. Okay, fine. This may not be the correct header name. I have just used a particular label here, okay, just to indicate there is some kind of a header name. So this is typically request headers. Okay, so there'll be multiple request headers, and then it would have a blank line. Right? To end the headers, okay, multiple request headers, and end of header with a blank line. Okay, so one blank line that would indicate, okay, I'm done with the headers, and once it's done with the headers, it's known, as soon as all this is communicated to the server knows, okay, fine, I have received all the headers, and now I can start my processing part. And so this is how the typical request goes. Okay, again the response part. Okay, now let's look at the syntax for response. Not very different. Okay. Okay, one more thing, which if I have to include in the request, after a blank line, okay, not because we are looking at currently we have there are various methods, right? Get is one of the method. Okay, I'll add here. When I put slash slash, you understand. Okay, there's some additional information, not part of the syntax. Okay, method can be. Okay, I'm not giving the entire list. Put. Okay, you have post more common, head, put, and other things. Okay, and so there can be these are various kinds of methods which are there. So some of the methods here, not all methods. Okay, some methods would mean that you will be sending some content from the client. So client is sending a content. See, example of content going from client to the server. Can you give me any example where the client is sending content to the server? From a browser, you are sending some content to the server, not just typing a URL. Yeah.
Yeah, credentials.
Credentials will go as part of your request and not necessarily, it's not a content.
Some files
Yeah.
to server.
File, yes, when you select and upload a file, right? And you upload a file. And when you places, yes, you select that upload, right? Some sites may give you option. Oh, you want to upload where a photo needs to be uploaded or some such thing, right? So there will be some cases where uploading. So when you say upload, it would not be going as a get method. It won't be a get method. It would be a post method. Okay. And when there is a post method, some content is to be there. Okay. The syntax remains the same. Method has changed from get to post. Request headers will be there. Okay, request headers also convey not only about the client, but even if there is a content, what is the content which I'm sending? What is the kind of content I'm uploading? Okay, it's an image which I'm uploading, right? So it will say, yes, what I'm sending is GIF and JPEG or GIF file or whatever it is, right? So all that information is in the header. Information about the content also can be there. Okay, and so what is typically why I'm mentioning here is that after a blank line, so I'm just saying, okay, I put a blank line and then would be the content. Okay, fine. This content is nothing but the content which you are uploading. Okay, so content may be there as part of a request, but not all requests will have content. Okay, so this is depends on so optional. I'll just put it in square bracket. Okay. Okay, for some of the methods, right, you will have content. Okay, so content, so after the blank line there will be a content. Now how much of the content is available through the header? Okay, so in a request header, for example, in a request header, so if it is not a get but if it is a post, okay, and maybe there is some other thing, okay, here you might find, okay, even if it doesn't matter here, you will have one blank before it goes for the blank line, it will say content type, and it will say, yes, what I'm uploading is a image / GIF. Okay, and it will even say content length, and it would put the size of the content, whatever it may be. Okay, fine. So it will say, yes, this is the content size, and then so many bytes here. Okay, here the content would be all that bytes. Okay, Fine. So content bytes would follow here. Fine. So that's what it is. Even more information about the content. So headers will have information about the content also. It's not only who the client is, information about the client preference and other things, but headers. So a lot of request related headers are there. Okay. So the typical syntax when you are sending anything from a client is like this. I'll show you practically also something like the kind of content which we get from the server. The response, when the response comes, I'll show that, because almost similar things will come from there. Okay. So content length, content type, content length, encoding, something like if there is a compression. So okay, I'll leave that, because exact headers I don't remember, but it would even mention that yes, I'm encoding using the gzip format because compression is done. Okay, compression. So all such headers are there. So headers typically describe the content as well as description about the client itself. Okay, his preferences, all such things. So a typical request is going to be like this. This here is the optional part. Okay, this is in case of a post. Okay, fine. If it is get, then you will not have this. If it is saying get, content won't be there. No content. So no header related to content also. Okay, this won't be there. This won't be there. There's a blank line and that's it. Okay, fine. So on similar lines, let's look at the response syntax now. So the response which comes from the client, the very first thing is the protocol. So it says protocol. Then the next thing is the status, and protocol status, and okay, and then it can have some text. Okay, there can be message. Okay, this message will correspond to the status. Okay, fine. And then there will be response headers. Okay, so typical response headers will be there, and these headers would be describing the content, because normally a response will have a content. Request may or may not have a content, but response, most of them will have a content. Okay, so after the headers, similar to what we have in the request again. Okay, so number of response headers, one line per header. Okay, it's one line per header. Okay, blank line to end headers. Okay, so after a blank line, you will have the content. Okay, so this is typically the syntax for a request and a response. So in both cases, it's like you can say HTTP is a protocol where we exchange content between client and server. Client can send content, optional, of course it's optional, but most of the time the server is sending back a content. So he's sending a content. Okay, fine. So content is what should come back from the server to the client, and then the browser knows how to render the content, just tries to handle the content. So in handling the while handling the content, sometimes it might even say, I don't understand this, browser, sometimes some of the browsers may say, I don't understand this particular type of content. He's sending me a PDF. I don't know how to handle the PDF. I don't know how to show the PDF to you. And therefore, you may have to link your PDF to a application. Maybe you need to link it to Adobe Acrobat Reader. So then the Acrobat Reader can be started, and that can be given the responsibility of rendering the PDF file. So client is supposed to render the content which is arriving from the server. Okay, and if it is not able to handle the content, doesn't have the proper handler for the content, even it might give you something like, oh, do you want to save this file? okay, and give you an option so that you can save it. This because it will just store the content in that file. What is the content it has received from the server? And so basically it's a pure interaction between client and the server, browser and the, typically a browser and a maybe a Tomcat server somewhere, right? Okay. So any questions so far? Yeah. Yeah. Anything not understood or nahi hai? Aisa? Fine. Okay, I'll show one more simple thing. Let me just try to show you. You can experience the headers, right? Let me just see. Anyone can try this. If you have installed Telnet, you have Telnet, okay, and okay, Telnet, and you may say, okay, fine, and port number 80. Fine. So we'll just connect to google.com. I want to connect on port number 80. So, you know, a host and port. Okay. Typically, we use this to make a connection. So, yes, we'll be able to make a connection. So, it's fine. We are connected. Okay. Only one thing here. I'll have to basically set local echo. Fine. So, that local echo is on. And that I need to understand. And now, if so, whatever I'm typing, that should be seen. Okay, so I'll just say, okay, get slash. Okay, I don't even say index.html as http slash 1.1. Okay, and one of the headers is host colon google.com, and I don't give anything else, right? I'm just giving a blank line, and there it is. It has responded back. Fine. So now this is what I wanted to show you. Look at the response which it has given. First part of the response is protocol, the first line. See, after that blank line, it's showing me the response which came from the server. Okay, so first line is http slash 1.1, that's a protocol. 301, that's a status. Moved permanently is the message corresponding to the status 301. Okay. Fine, and then it says location. So this 301 is saying, okay, this whatever you are looking for slash, it has been moved to www.google.com because I was looking at only google.com. So it says, okay, you need to actually call this guy. Okay, the type of still I'm going to give you some content, and the type of the content is text slash HTML. Character set semicolon, additional information about the content. Oh, character set is here, okay, it just said connection. This is like the Telnet has got disconnected now, okay, from the client, okay, from that server. Okay, but let's go through this, right? So fine, this is location is, so you just use HTTP protocol, fine, use this URL, you can connect there. Content type is text HTML. Content security policy report only, right? So these are some headers, okay, fine. And date, it has sent the date, date of the response. This response expires. Now, why the expires thing? Anyone? This is in a response and he's saying expires. Why? The next line basically shows it. See, when a response is given, he is sending the content. So he's saying this content will become stale after this time. Okay. So it's not valid afterwards. So anyway, it is expiring as soon as he sent it. Okay. Fine. Cache control, public. So this is related to if the client is doing caching, right? Browsers do some caching also. So if the browser is caching, he knows that, oh, this need not be cached because it's going to expire after this time. Okay, server is GWS. See, it's telling about the server now. Like, when a request is to be sent from client to the server, the client is sending some information, right? The client sends information about itself, like agent and all those things. Right? Content length. So it says 219. That's a number of bytes I'm sending. Okay. There are these other additional headers. Okay, let's skip that. Then is a blank line. After X frame options, that's the last header. Okay, there is a blank line. This is indicating I'm through with my headers. Now starts the content part. And here is the HTML content. Okay, fine. And here is the HTML content. So in a browser, if you see this, okay, it will be showing in very in a header that yes, this is 301 moved. So the title of the page would also change to 301 moved. Okay, and yeah, and within the body again H1 is there. So using H1, he's just saying 301 moved. The document has moved. And here you would provide a link. If it is shown in the browser, if from browser you are doing this, it would have done this. But on a browser, you don't typically see this response because there is a 301. The browser immediately realizes and makes a second request following this. Okay, so you won't do it, but if it was a browser, it would have done it that way. Okay. But you can see the syntax. My whole idea was to make you aware of the syntax and the kind of exchange which takes place between client and the server. Okay. Fine. Actually, you would have been interested in the request headers also, right? Okay. Fine. We may have to write a code for that in Java. Fine. Using the socket and server socket classes, and then also with the help of that we can write one application, right? And from browser, instead of connecting to a well-known server like that, you could actually connect to your local application, and that application can then be made to see, okay, oh, these are the headers which have arrived, right? This is how the request has come, and maybe you don't even need to give back a response, but at least you will know how the browser sends the response, a request. Okay, fine. You may be wondering what is telnet, or is it known? Okay, you know what is telnet? I use
Yes.
that. Okay, you're aware of this, right? So yeah, so telnet is a very general purpose TCP client, right? Which can be made to connect to any server. Okay. Right. So clear on the syntax part of the request and response. Okay. Response, at least we have seen, and maybe next time what I'll do is I'll have a code. I'll show even the request side from a typical browser. Okay. And we'll have a code to do that. Okay. Now proceeding to what actually goes on within the server side. Because we are going to work on the server side with when we talk of servlets. There's something which are typically deployed on the server side. Let's look at the whole thing in this diagram part. Okay, I'll try to put it again. Okay, let's look at what exactly goes on within a. Okay, so if I think this is a. So let's say we start Tomcat, right? So when a Tomcat container would be started, what is Tomcat? It's a Java-based simple application. There's a application, right? It's a Java application. Understand? It has a main method. Tomcat has its own main method where it has its own starting point. So when we say, oh, I want to run Tomcat, it starts one application. Okay, so it's one Java application. When the Java application starts, okay, it does a lot of things. Fine. So this Java application is looking for, okay, it's looking in the configured web application folder. Okay, there is a folder for the web application, so it's fine. So it's saying, okay, here we have a web app folder. Okay, and within the web app folder, okay, it's checking what are the folders. Oh, it finds a folder called academic, and let's assume there is a folder called academic. Okay, fine. Now the next thing, like academic, there can be other folders, right? So first thing what happens is it looks at each folder, and for each of the, so this is called a web application, and this is my web application. So any folder which it finds, that's called a web application. Okay, and for this web application, okay, what the Java application is doing, it's saying, oh, let me create one object. So it says, okay, I'm going to create one object. The object is of type, so there is an object which is of type servlet context. Okay, it creates an object of servlet context. So what is servlet context? It's a name of an interface. This is an interface. Okay, so some implementation of servlet context interface, the object of such an object class would be created. Okay. Okay, I have not used the prefix part. When I'm saying servlet context, this belongs to the package Java x.servlet. Okay, or if you are using Tomcat 9 and onwards, you will say Jakarta.servlet. Okay, Java X becomes Jakarta. Okay, so what will be done is, as many as the number of application it finds, it has to create so many servlet context object. So typically one servlet context per web application. Okay, fine. So just creating one servlet context, what's the role of this servlet context? Okay, there are many things, many important things which are done using the servlet context object. Okay, servlet context object is an object which can be used for interacting with the container itself. So your Java code, whichever you are writing, will be able to interact with the Tomcat, fine, your container, through this servlet context object. Okay, we'll understand more details. Okay, fine. Now one more thing. Okay, next step. I mentioned that within this folder, if you have any kind of resources, GIF file, JPEG file, or any kind of a file, someone will be able to use it directly, right? So if you want, it's not but many times we actually want a Java code to be run, and that should be generating the response, okay, to generate the content. Fine, you want the content to be generated by a Java code, okay, which we call as a servlet. So if you want to have servlet, no, you don't place the servlet code directly here. The servlet code will not be placed directly here. You don't put the class file over here. Of course, your class files corresponding to the servlet will have to be placed within the academic folder itself. Okay, now what we have is, there is one special folder within each web application. So this is your web application. Within the web application, there is one special folder which is known as the private folder for the application. It has a typical name. There is a name called web-inf. This is nothing but a private folder for the application. Why we call it as a private folder of the application? Because if someone tries a URL, right? See, what was the URL by which I can access anything in the academic folder? That URL was http:// the host where my Tomcat is running / my application name was academic. Okay, and now if I say /, if anyone tries to say, oh, let me look into what is there in the web INF there, and if he's saying web INF, if someone tries like this, web INF / anything, or even just the web INF itself, okay, the container is not going to give a positive response. The container is only going to give you a 404. That response code. Status, right? Oh, we thought that 301 was one of the status, typical status code. So the status of 404 is what goes back in the response. If you try anything in web INF folder, so this is a private folder. Okay, so in my application area, I have a folder which we use as a private folder for the application. So this is where typically all your code can remain. Yeah, so it will be part of your application, but it will not become a content. Okay, fine. Under web INF, whatever you have is never going to be the content for the client. Okay, it doesn't go as a content directly to the client. Okay, so web INF is for that purpose. Fine. In this folder called web INF, okay, under web INF, there is still one more. There is one typical file. It's an XML format file called web.xml. So we have a web.xml file. Okay, this file is known as the deployment descriptor, and this file is called the So we have a deployment descriptor for our application. So each application, understand, now every application has its own folder, separate folder. Fine. So each application has one deployment descriptor. Okay. Every application which is being deployed is of this structure. It has the structure, the application's folder name, right, within which web INF, and there is a web.xml file. Okay, if this file exists, if such a file is found, it will be used to configure this servlet context object. The servlet context object is, when it is created, it has actually got information read from this web.xml file. There are more actions which are taken about the web.xml file. Fine. Whatever web.xml file is found, okay, all the information from your web.xml will be available through the servlet context object. Okay, so one deployment descriptor, one web XML is one application's deployment descriptor. Okay, another application folder, another web INF, and having its own web.xml file. So that's another deployment descriptor for another application. Okay, so each application has its own deployment descriptor. Okay, deployment descriptor has information about the application. Okay, we talk about URLs, right? So if you want to initially look at that URL part, or we may go at URL later, because for that URL, you know, to be used in a particular way, we will need to understand the servlet part first. What is a servlet? And basically there is a life cycle to a servlet. So one of the things we will need to understand is the life cycle of a servlet. Okay, so we'll be looking at the life cycle of a servlet, but even before going to the life cycle of a servlet, I would like you to understand the deployment descriptor and how it is used. Let's say this. Okay, so let me write it here. And every web application can have a I'm just using Tomcat, but understand it's every whatever the even if it's not Tomcat, any other thing, they would still have one such folder. Okay, in which it may not be called web app, it may be a different name, but typically most of them have used the web app as the folder name. So within that folder, you would have a every web application, right? The structure of the web app folder. Okay, so you will have okay, I'll just take academic as an example. Okay, and in academic, you will have slash. Okay, I'm using slash. Fine, I don't have that habit of backslash. Okay, fine. Okay, now there are more things to it. Okay, this I'll just put. Okay, so what is WebINF? Okay, so this is the private folder for the web application, and within WebINF itself, you would have one of the folder. There are basically two folders. One is the folder called classes. Okay. A folder for the Java compiled classes. Okay, and there's still one more folder. Library. A folder for library, Java libraries. Third-party libraries, right? I should put it as third-party. Okay. Basically, they are the jar files. Okay, and so you will have the jar files over here. Okay, fine. So these are the typical folders, and if I just look at the academic folder, okay, slash, okay, so you can have all kind of static resources for your application directly under the academic itself. Okay, you can create other folders. Fine. For example, typically someone might even create something like saying, okay, academic / images, and here can be your GIF files, right? And someone can say academic / and anything else. So like images folder, you might be having some, even the applet folders can be there, but we don't have applets now. Yeah. So yeah, anything else? Yeah. Like images, maybe someone says, I have the PDFs. There might be a number of PDF files. So this is just your way of organizing your static content. All your static content can be there. Okay. Fine. But WebINF is when these three folders are typically there. Okay. Okay. Now coming to the WebINF folder. can contain XML file web.xml. It has to be like this, okay? All these things are case sensitive, okay? You should call it as lowercase web.xml, okay? Web.inf has to be all uppercase, and it is dash and no underscore, it is hyphen. Right? So take care of all this, and so a web application can contain an XML file called web.xml. Okay, let's see a typical web.xml file. Okay. This file is called the deployment descriptor. So it's a deployment descriptor for the particular web application. So each web application has its own deployment descriptor. Okay. Well, let's look at the content of a web.xml file. Okay. A web XML file is it's an XML. So I'm not looking at the header part, but the top level tag which in the XML would be web-app and /web app. We understand XML, right? I hope you all know about XML, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So basically, even before this, there will be one line which will be that header kind of a line. Okay. And but yeah, the main tag for the main XML tag is the web app. Okay, so within web app /web app, so one web app is for one web application. It's so one web app tag found in the web.xml for one web application. Okay, and here for your web application, you would like to have a description available. So we'll say some descriptive name. So we'll call it as the display -name. So there is a tag called display name. Okay. So that's so by this you are giving a display name. Fine. What is to be used for display purpose? Okay. Fine. See where this will be useful. This display name. You will have whatever container you may be using. For example, you are using Tomcat. So even Tomcat would give some administrative console. Okay, it will give some kind of an application where you can do the administration of all the web applications for Tomcat. So when you are seeing a list of web application, what are the applications in this particular instance of Tomcat which is running here, right? In that list, when it is listing, it will give you even the display name also. Okay, if you want, you can include a description. So you can give a description of your web application. So within description and /description. Okay, you can include a whole lot of description about your application. Okay, fine. So all this information, understand this, all this information is going to be available from that servlet context object. See, if someone looks at the whole thing, it's like this. We have the object of servlet context, so which is java x.servlet context, right? That's an interface, and it has a public method returns string get display name. Oh, so if someone uses this, that servlet context object when it is created, right, by looking at the deployment descriptor, on that particular object, if someone says get display name, he'll get whatever is written in this display name. So so things from this deployment descriptor are picked up and made available through the servlet context object, right? So if you have certain settings, right, you have done JDBC. Okay, fine. At least you have seen what is JDBC. You know about JDBC. Okay, So someone might like to say that, for making connection to a database, your web application here, right, which you are developing, may like to make a connection to a database. Fine. So when you want to make a connection to a database, what is the information needed? How do you make a connection to a database server? Yeah. For JDBC, what is the code you will write?
I think 6 steps of the database connectivity.
Sorry. Okay, let me come here. Yeah. What's the first step in JDBC? Do you do something like class.forName? No? Was this shown to you? No?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in class.forName, what's the thing which you give here? What's the parameter?
Drivers.
Name of a driver class, right? Fine. Now, what is the, would you like to hard code it here? Or would it be a good idea that I can change it without having to recompile? Right? So what you might like to do here is, okay, right, I would like to pass, right, this information to my web application, that my JDBC driver class name is this. What is the name of the driver class? Okay, so you want to give the name of the driver class, make it available to the components in the web application. Okay, then you configure in your web application, and in the web application we can say this is context para. Okay, and you can think of any name. For example, here I might just say jdbc.driver.class or class name. Okay, and then the next line I'll say parameters value, and here which one, com.mysql. I don't know which one you have used. Probably you have anything which you were told of, any particular which database do you connect to, MySQL or which one?
Yes, sir. MySQL.
Okay, so was it MySQL sorry,
mysql.cj.jdbc.driver.
cg.jd dot, right? Okay. CJ. So by this, what you have done is you have made available to, now see, I have written this, right? And what we have here, this information is going to be read. So one thing, you can have multiple such things, okay? So I'll say, okay, fine, we have the one context param is going to be written like this. I'll be having one more context param whose name I'll call it as JDBC URL. Yeah, we use a URL or and yeah, you would have been told about the JDBC URL. What's the JDBC URL? JDBC://localhost, something like this, colon, what was it, 885.923, I don't recollect.
3306.
3306 slash and my DB, something like this, right? Okay, fine. So what you do is you create these parameters in your deployment descriptor. Fine. So any such information, I've just taken one example for purpose of JDBC. We don't want these to be hard coded in the application, right? When I deploy at a different place, the driver maybe it's not the MySQL, it may be some other driver I'm using, maybe it's a different database URL I have to use then in that case, right? So if I have to use a different URL, and similarly, not only about this, someone might even have to mention about the JDBC dot instead of username and password. Okay, so change give your username. Okay, whatever the username by which you connect. Maybe someone uses root on MySQL. If it was Oracle, someone would have said Scott and Tiger. I don't know whether it's still working. Typically, we used to have that Scott as a username and password would be Tiger for Oracle. Okay, that was for Oracle. But then you should be using the driver name and your JDBC URL also for the for that particular database. Okay, I mean the whole point is here that this context param, through this you are setting up various parameters which will be available to anyone who has a reference to the object of servlet context. Let's see how the servlet context enables the access to those parameters now. Okay, so these parameters now can be used like this. So someone can say, okay, we have the get display name to get the display name part. Okay, then these are the context params. So this would be available by using string get init parameter. Get init parameter takes a string, a parameter name. Okay, sorry, but this is one more method, right? These are methods of the servlet context. So public, I think it returns a string array, get init parameter names. Okay, no parameter. Yeah, get init parameter names. So you will get all such, what are all the parameter names? And for a given parameter name, you can ask for the what's the value, parameter value. Okay, so method name says init parameter names. The tag here is context param. Remember this. Okay, so context param is a tag available for deployment descriptor, fine, accessible through the servlet context object. We'll have to just check whether it is returning a string array or probably it might be returning a enumeration of string. Anyway, so anyway, in both cases, we will have a mechanism to access all of them. Either it's an array. I think it's an array. Okay, we'll check in the API later. Okay, fine. So what you can do is download Tomcat. If you have not, okay, in your lab you already have Tomcat installed, and I'm not sure whether you have the documentation also installed on that. So the API should be available. That's a whole idea here. Okay, if your API should be available, I have to check on this. Okay. Right. So the okay, so like this, right? So there are more kind of tags which go in a web application. I've just shown a small example of some of the tags which we use in a deployment descriptor. Okay. Right. So clear up to this point. Okay. Fine. See, I'll put just one more kind of a tag because that's another useful tag. Okay. There's another tag called servlet and sorry. Okay. And the kind of sub tags in this will be servlet name. Okay. You will have to give some kind of a name. Okay, maybe someone says hello servlet. Okay, maybe that might be the first servlet which you will be creating, okay, slash servlet name and servlet hyphen class, and here you might have some, it might be org dot, you call it as Gujarat University, or you use RCC, Rolwala Computer Center. In your package names, what do you typically use as a prefix?
RCC.
RCC. So org.rcc.ejt, okay. Okay. See, what I have done here is, this is the kind of deployment descriptor the container is reading. The Tomcat is going to read this, and then it's going to take the action. First action, it was corresponding to this one web XML file. There is one object of servlet context which has been created, and we understand this. One object of this which has been created. But when it comes across a tag like servlet, okay, what it is, so there'll be multiple such tags, okay. What it has been asked to do, by this you are asking it, normally if you write a main method, or what do you do in a main method? You know the class name already, right? And you would just say new and create one object of it, and then you'll start invoking methods on it, right? Create object of a class and create and invoke methods on it. So exactly similar thing is to be done, but in a what is the class? No, I'm not doing hard coding in my application anywhere. It's not in the Tomcat. Tomcat doesn't hard code what is the class which is to be, whose object needs to be created. I'll read from here, okay. So by the servlet tag, it's like saying, okay, create a new object of the class called org.rcc.ejt.helloservlet and remember it by the name which I've used here, servlet, hello servlet. So hello servlet is the name by which it will remember the object which it has created. So a servlet entry is used to ask it to create an object. Fine. It's like you're saying, okay, please create an object of this class. Remember it by this name. So there is no relation between these two, basically. Okay. It's fine. This we call it hello servlet. That's the name of a class which you have compiled, right? And this is just any name which you might have. You could even say just say hello. Okay, fine. Remember it as hello. That's fine. Okay. Someone can even use it again and say, okay, let me have another one. I want one more object of this class to be created, and I would like you to remember it called hi. That's fine. You may use the same servlet class and create two different objects. Clear? This is like, you're not writing the program to create the object. You do not create the object directly. You put it in the configuration file. You're asking the Tomcat to do it. Okay, Tomcat reads all this and then decides what to do. Okay, and then Tomcat knows that it has to invoke certain methods. It's programmed to invoke certain methods. What is servlet? When I'm saying hello servlet, so the class which you pass here, okay, fine. This is class name, right? This class which you are passing here, okay, name of a class which is implementing an interface, okay, which is javax.servlet.servlet. Okay, fine. So see, whatever methods of this interface that should have been implemented by our class. The requirement is that this hello servlet, otherwise you cannot be passing a abstract class name here, right? This cannot be an abstract class name. That's one thing. The class name mentioned here cannot be an abstract class name. Okay, so it should be possible to create object. That's our requirement, and it needs to be something which is implementing the interface called javax.servlet. Yeah, so that's the interface which should have been implemented by our class. The requirement is this. So use any class name, okay, which is implementing this. This is one of the components which is responsible, which basically is taking a responsibility for generating a content. I know I'll be able to generate some content for you. Okay, so this will be this is someone who will be, the code in this will be used for so whenever someone is asking for a particular resource, there'll be a mechanism to map that. Okay, there will have to be a mechanism to map hello, the object called hello. Okay, there's an object by the name hello, there's another object by the name hi. The objects are of a given class. They both may be of a given same class, but they are two different objects. Okay, and somewhere we will have a mapping. Okay, we'll have a mapping which says, okay, so we'll have not servlet mapping, it's a URL. Within which one of the tags will be saying, okay, I want to map hello with a URL pattern. Okay, I want, if someone has returned slash, okay, fine. And so what we have done here is we have said, okay, now see, whenever a request comes from the server, right? Okay, now here what I'm writing is not part of the, it's just so that I'm putting in explanation. Okay, it's like http :/ and whatever the host, I'll just put it as host slash, I'm not putting even the port number here, I just want to finish in the same line, and your app name. Okay, in short I'll just say app, okay, which could be academic in our case, and then someone has said hello. Okay, so this is what that slash hello is. So after the application name, because this deployment descriptor already identifies this, whatever your application, that slash app here is for that academic. Okay, fine. So this is slash hello for this one. Okay, so if this is the URL someone is trying to hit, then I have to use the object identified by hello. That object is of the class this one. Okay, fine, clear. So URL mapping is done for the object. Objects are identified by name. Objects are created of classes which are implementing the servlet interface. Okay, so this is how the role of servlet comes into picture. And we'll be looking at the life cycle of a servlet. And I think any questions you have, because now we'll continue tomorrow, I think. Yeah, any questions? Anything not understood, anything more which is complicated for you in all of this? Is it difficult or it is easy to understand? Like, yeah, we may have to try out. Yes, we'll have to try out practically also. Okay, but yeah, is the structure of the application becoming clear? That web-inf folder. Okay, and what basically is a web application? It's just a set of resources. Okay, and it has a name which is basically mapped to a folder here in case of Tomcat or any servlet container basically. Okay. Okay, anyway, you can think, and tomorrow, yeah, you can initially, when we begin, you can ask all questions. Yeah, and even while I'm talking, if you feel, and if anyone feels, you can just unmute and ask a question, right? If you feel something is not understood.